What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brent and today is Thursday, so we are doing portfolio reviews. I have my laptop pulled up so that way I can look at each of the photos that the subscribers have sent me. And this is an opportunity for you, the subscribers, to be able to send in images, and I'm just going to give my take on it. I'm going to try to give a little bit of critique as well as a little bit of praise so that you know exactly kind of where my mind is on these images. And just a disclaimer, there's no right or wrong way to do photography. So take everything I say with a grain of salt and know that it's coming from love because I want to continue building this photography community. If you do want to submit your images, there will be a link down below that you can go ahead and submit. Give me a little bit of backstory on what it is that you do as a photographer. And every single Thursday, I will continue to pull up these images and try to get through as many portfolios as possible. So without wasting any more time, let's hop right into it. So first up, we have Mr. Cameron Newkirk, and Cameron comes to us from Long Island, New York. And first things first, I just want to say thank you so much for trusting me to, review your portfolio. So here we go. Cameron sent over 5 different images. And the first thing that I want to point out off rip, and I'm going to put up all 5 images, is the consistency in which your images are captured. I really appreciate, and this is something that I look out for immediately when I start to coach someone or critique their portfolio, is just how consistent can you be in your imagery. And I know in your background story, you noted that some of the images are actually shot on different cameras, different lenses, and it is still super consistent. So that is very good. That means that your eye is very much trained to seeing exactly what it is that you want to see. And you said you wanted to be in fashion photography. So that's very important, being able to be very consistent. The second thing that I noticed that is really good is your composition. So another thing that stands out to me whenever I talk to a newer photographer is just how they compose their images and being able to make sure that, you keep some adequate headspace, or you're shooting either straight on, below, or above, and just basing it on what you want out of the final image. And I can very much tell that there's a lot of intention going on with the way that you are composing these images. Now, let's get into the critique portion. So you mentioned that you wanted to get better at using more than one strobe. And in looking at your images, specifically, I'm going to put them up here, specifically the images that are shot in studio on a backdrop. The first thing that I would do for you, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be bringing in another strobe. The first thing that I would do, if you have the ability to, is pull the subjects off of the background, right? I'm noticing, especially in the image where the young lady is holding the black purse, and then also the image where the young man has on the Hello Kitty gear, they're blending into the background just a little bit too much. And that leads me to believe one or two things. And you can tell me if I'm right or wrong in the comments. It's likely a large light source, and the light source is decently far away from the subject, but they're also pushed up pretty close to the background. And I can kind of tell that as well, because with the photo where the man is holding the Hello Kitty gear, I can see a little bit of his shadow super close to the background. So that kind of leads me to believe that they're pretty close to the backdrop. So the first thing that I would do is pull them off of the backdrop. And I would actually, if you can, switch to a smaller modifier on your single light source and bring it closer to your subject. What that's going to allow you to do is create a little bit more drama in the background. So it's going to change the levels of the background. As of right now, especially with the photo with the man with the Hello Kitty, you can see that the background and him are about the same exposure. So what that's going to do is it's going to create a pretty flat image. So if you can pull him off just a little, push the modifier in closer, what that's going to do, inverse square law, I'm not going to go through all of that, but basically it's going to reduce some of the light that's hitting the background, and it's actually going to make it darker. If you don't have that option, if you're not able to, bring down that level, what I will say, you can start to feather your key light, right? So that it's not hitting the background so much. And now is where you will bring in a second light. And the reason why I know that you can already kind of see this within your own work is the image that you took of the young lady where she's standing by the fence. You can see how when you put the sun behind her and you have that little bit of edge, you can see it on her shoulder. That lets me know that that an edge is going to separate your subject from the background. So that's the first place that I would start for you. And it honestly doesn't matter which side that you choose to put that edge on. You can put the edge on the key side, so you can put all of the light coming from the same side, or you can do it cross. I prefer to do it cross most of the time, but it's up to you wherever you have the space. I would use something like a gridded strip box, so that way you're not leaking any light onto the background, and you can bring some separation from your subject and the background. And that's going to be the biggest thing here throughout your portfolio that I'm looking at, because when I tell you, it will instantly make your photos pop a ton more. I can't state it enough. So the two big takeaways here for the in-studio portraits where you're up against the background. Number one, try to bring that subject off. Bring that modifier closer. Let's start to limit some of that light that hits the background, right? Number two, if you don't have that option, let's start to feather or move the position of our key light so it's not like a true Rembrandt. And even in some of these, I can tell that it's a little maybe flatter, so like closer to in front of the subject as opposed to a true Rembrandt. I would say even start to push it more toward that side lighting, and that's where that second light, when you bring it in, it can kind of lift up that part of the shadow. So that's what I would do if you don't have the option to, you know, bring the subject off very far. And it doesn't have to be a drastic move forward, just a little bit forward, push that thing closer and start to create a little bit of drama. The second thing, bringing in that edge light. So you don't necessarily need to start off by booming in, you know, an overhead or something on the hair. I would just literally start to illuminate that shoulder even just a little bit. And then that will also help when they turn from side to side, kind of getting different, you know, looks and things as they move throughout the space. So that's where I can see you bringing in a second light and just immediately creating a ton more drama in your images, because the biggest thing that creates the drama in our images and also too lends itself very well to fashion photography is contrast, playing around with light and dark. If your whole image is light, yes, it's going to be a very well exposed image, but it's not necessarily going to have that wow factor. And if you're trying to go for that wow factor, I would definitely suggest the two pieces that I just named. Moving on to your outdoor images, I actually really love the way that you use flash in your outdoor images, because a lot of times when people use flash in outdoor images, in my opinion, it just takes over the image. It consumes the image and it does way too much. And yours is very well balanced, especially the young lady who has on the athletic top and bottom. I really love the way that you were able to utilize the sun in the background to kind of, again, create that edge light. The only thing that I would say with this image is the fence. The fence is very distracting just because of where it cuts into her body. So if we could have taken her on the other side of that fence and maybe have something a little more open in the background, because I love the way that the bokeh is hitting, that would probably do her a lot more justice. But the composition, as well as where you have the lights placed, I love it. You have a nice little shadow on the right side of her face, and you have a nice key light coming into the left side. I really like the way that that sun is illuminating her right shoulder, and how it looks as if, and I'm pretty sure you exposed for that background before you turn that flash on. Probably did some high speed sync, and I love that. I love the way that you were able to balance those two, and that is something, again, that you can start to try and emulate in the studio, because in the studio we are trying to take a lot of components that come from a perfect natural light scenario and apply them into the studio. So you see already what your eyes, you know, are recognizing as a good portrait, which is, you know, having that edge light, creating that separation, and then also having a nice key light. You do a really great job of exposure. So I would say, take this image here, the one where she's outside standing near the gate, and kind of use that as like a gauge. Like, how can I get that same effect that I put her in with the sun with adding in a second light? Thank you so much, Cameron. And we're going to move on to the next person. If you're looking to elevate your studio photography lighting, look no further. Click the link in my bio, as the studio lighting bundle is now live. 24 different lighting setups, light ratios, cheat sheet, detailed behind the scenes light placement. Gonna go over how to meter lights. This is the bundle of a lifetime. I'm gonna do strobes and constant lights all in the same bundle. I don't wanna waste any more of your time. Let's get back to the content. Chelsea, please come to the stage. Thank you so much for sending in your images. And I want to go ahead and get started, because you mentioned in your breakdown that you really wanted to get better at lighting mastery. And first things first, when I look at your portfolio, I love the fact that you push boundaries, that you really try to lean into your creative energy, and it doesn't look like you're afraid to really try anything. So I love that. The first image that I want to kind of talk about is this one here, the maternity image, where it looks as though, I'm pretty sure you used one light. It looks like it is maybe either side lighting or maybe just a little bit behind, sort of like an edge. A few different things that I would say here. Number one, the thing that I feel would help this image to pop off of the screen is if you added in probably another edge light coming in from the other side, because as you can see, the back part of her arm is pretty much lost in shadow. And I know what we're going for here. So I would bring her a little bit off that background, because as you can see, we're getting some spillage, and I don't know what modifier you used, but if you could use something with like a grid and maybe feather it away from the background more to really increase that drama and allow that background to turn to black, I feel like that would really just, you know, chef's kiss, bring it together. But yes, I would say bringing in another form of light, maybe, you know, to her backside, or even another edge on the other side. That way you kind of give a rim to her entire shape. which in maternity looks, typically looks really, really good. And then, like I said, pulling her off of it, because it looks like this might be on some sort of a cyc wall. So if it is on some sort of a cyc wall, then we can definitely pull her forward some. And it would also allow you to put a little bit more level onto her face potentially, if you wanted to bring her face, higher up in level potentially. So you could do something like 2 strip boxes pointing at her from both sides, right? That kind of cover her top to bottom. Because most time with ladies, you can get a decently sized strip box and it will cover them for a medium shot like this. Move her forward a little bit. And by you having those lights pointing away from the background, you're able to turn it into more of a complete darkness. And now she just kind of has this glow about her that we typically, want to see in maternity. And I see that she has on a little bit of jewelry as well. And that, like I said, would really be able to help kind of bring this image to life. Another thing that you could do is kind of have her in some sort of a silhouette. So you could kind of reverse this effect where you blast the light either into the white. So you kind of move her back just a little bit, blast the light into the white, and then you give her an edge where she's more silhouetted. So she's holding the belly, amazing pose, holding the belly. She's got great shape. And then you kind of give it more of that silhouette kind of vibe, right? That's super, super dope. And what that also allows you to do is kind of put her entire body in somewhat of a shadow. And then with those, I usually like to take them down to black and white. But this is a great use of contrast. I just think, we can always control the contrast a little bit better. And lastly, if you did want to keep that background somewhat of a gray, then this is where you can employ something like a global fill, right? If you have maybe a big umbrella or you have some sort of white wall, white surface, whatever behind you, you can shoot a little bit of flash into there. And all that's going to do is help to bring up just a little bit of level on those parts of her body that are just falling off into complete darkness, right? So we kind of want to either lean in one way or the other, right? We're either going to darken her off so that we just focus eyes on the belly, or we can bring up a little bit of that level just so we can kind of show that little bit of control. The next image that I want to pull up is this colorful image here where you have the young lady with the, I believe that's a sword. That's pretty cool. With the sword behind her back. And this is an amazing use of color, in my opinion. This is probably my favorite image out of all of the images that you sent because, as you know, I love to use my color. And I can see that you use 2 different colors here. We have like a teal and then we have a little bit of an orange. And I'm not sure if you had a third light kind of using some sort of white light potentially, but I can definitely see that catch. So I really love the color balance here. I feel like the balance here is amazing. It goes really well with the outfit choice and with the posing. With this image specifically, I do think one thing that would bring this out even more, and I don't know the exact camera settings that you use or what the ambient light was looking like, but if you wanted to increase the drama on this photo, color typically saturates really well in the shadow parts of our image, right? So if this image is already very highlighted, so like there's a whole lot of highlights already in the image, it's very evenly lit, then your colors aren't gonna have that punch that you might want them to have. And if you do want them to have that punch, then what you're gonna wanna do is create a little bit more drama in those shadows. And something like the dramatic cross out of the ebook is a great start when you are trying to create some nice dramatic shadows, because they're not gonna fall to black necessarily because you're using a gridded key light and you're also using a gridded edge light. So it's not going to fall to black, but it is going to be just gray enough to when you pop that color in there, it's going to saturate quite well, especially something like your oranges, right? Because your oranges can get really cut by that white light. So I love the way that you kiss that orange in here. But like I said, if this is something that you wanted to get to be more saturated and just a little bit more dramatic, then you're going to want to create a little bit more shadow. So I can kind of tell that the key light might be using some sort of large source. And for someone like you who really leans into the contrast, start to mess around with some smaller light sources. Really get comfortable with grids. And as you get comfortable with grids, you can start to really just boop, pop light in where you want it to be. And I feel like that for you specifically in your workflow is going to make things a ton easier because, like I said, I can kind of see where the white light is just kind of like washing out some of that blue. And of course you can bring it up in post, but if you wanted to get it right in camera, because you mentioned workflow, and to me, to speed up one's workflow, you have to get things right in camera. Start to create a little bit more drama in your initial image. I'm not sure if you break your images down light by light, but that is another thing that I would suggest that you do. get the initial exposure correct first. So let's say you start with a dramatic cross, put that dramatic cross in, see where your shadows are. Okay, cool. Now pop in those RGBs and just take an image and see what they all do together. Then you can make fine tune adjustments. But this to me is one of my favorite images. I love this image. So I literally just did something that was like, teal and orange. So this image is amazing. I love this composure, composition, posing, everything great. The last thing that I wanted to touch on for you is you mentioned wanting to get better at kind of telling a story when you're doing your photography. And the image I'm going to use for this is the one where the young lady is in the lemon bikini and we have like some lemons and, is that an orange? Yeah, lemons and an orange, and she's in the pool. So I found your Instagram so that I could take a look at the full set of what you were doing here with this image. And one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm trying to make images that are in a little bit more of a storied fashion is I don't want to fall too deep, right? It's okay to sometimes, but I don't want to fall too deep into standard portraiture. And what I mean by this, a lot of images where the subject is bringing her eyes to the camera and just like posing, right? Bringing the eyes to the camera. What I like to do instead, and you did it with a few images here, what I like to do instead, try to create a little world for them to live in for a moment, right? So let's say, for example, you have, lemon bathing suit and you have a couple lemons. Maybe you create a scenario where she has some lemonade, where it has lemon slices in the thing of lemonade, and you just want her to focus all of her energy on pouring one glass of lemonade, right? The storyline can be, she finds these lemons, right? She picks these lemons off the tree, comes in, cuts them up, creates this lemonade, and now she's pouring one glass of lemonade. So in each part of that story that you're trying to tell, try to create a world where she just lives in it, right? She's literally living in this world where she's, boom, slicing it on the cutting board. She's literally living in the world where she's squeezing it into the jar. And then at the end, you can pop in some images where now we've kind of got this whole scene set and we'll kind of look to the camera and, boom, bow, bow, right? But if you can kind of get really, really good at creating a world around the props and things that you're using as opposed to them just being there, right? So for example, the image where she's in the pool just standing with the lemons around. The reason why it's not probably giving the story that you want is because they're just lemons in the pool and she's looking at you. Right? So what we want to try to do is create something that's a little bit more world building, right? And and this is an easy fix, right? It doesn't necessarily even have to be taking her out of the pool. You could still use the pool. They have different inflatables that you can put up that have like a little cup holder. Boom, she's got the lemonade in there. She's got her glasses on. She's laying back, kicking back, and she's got, the lemons. Okay. So it doesn't necessarily have to have a huge change, but I think one of the biggest shifts that you can make in the beginning is kind of getting away from like that typical portraiture where it's just like, okay, throw some props in there and we look, and then we look. I love eyes to the camera more than probably any person you'll ever meet, but when it comes to trying to tell that little bit of story, let's try to immerse our subject in that story. That way, as you photograph it, you're literally just documenting something that's actually happening. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I really appreciate you sending in your images, and I hope this was some great insight as to, how my mind works when I look at your portfolio, but I love it. Love the creativity. Continue to push. Please don't stop pushing that creativity. That gives me life, and I love it. Let's move on. Richard, welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for sending in your images. I have your 3 images pulled up right now, and I see that you want to get better at lighting and composition. So let's get right into it. I want to start here with your posing, right? Your posing in general. I really love it. Your portfolio seems to be very strong with you understanding kind of how you want your subjects / models to pose. I'm not sure how much of that is your directing and how much of that is, things that they already know, but I can definitely tell that you have an eye for ensuring that subjects are in the most flattering position possible. And I can see that through each of the 3 images that you included here. I absolutely love the way that you compose the images and the amount of space that you leave in front of, behind, or above and below your subjects, and how they are cropped within said image. You have here a medium shot where the young lady is standing in a sort of a side profile, eyes to the camera. Absolutely love it. I mean, there's not really anything that I would adjust as far as the composition is concerned. The image where the young lady is laying down on the rocks, really love how you have her kind of centered up in the frame, with the sun kind of peeking through the clouds there, looking very angelic. Love that. Posing, composition on point. for sure. Let's dive into the lighting piece. And I want to actually start with the image where she's on the beach and she's laying on the rocks. I think this image, for me specifically, I can see where the artificial light is coming from. And that will happen a ton whenever you are doing seated poses, right? Where the floor is easily illuminated by the light that you're using. And I'm not sure where the sun is here. This looks like it might be sort of towards like sunset or maybe on its way to sunset, right? So something like a 3-4 p.m. I actually think this could have been shot natural light. So we could have taken away the artificial light or used the artificial light as more of a fill. Why do I say this? I do think that the artificial light is taking over just a little bit. And I notice this because I don't really see an edge being created from the sunlight. So normally when we put the sun to our subject's back and then we kind of use, our artificial light to illuminate said subject, we get that edge that we would also get in the studio when we do like a cross lighting or something like that. And that's not something I'm really seeing right here. And I do think that with different exposure settings in camera, if it was shot natural light, that you would have been able to keep a lot of the organic feel of the image. And you might have to turn her just a little bit. Again, I don't know exactly where the sun is, and you might have to turn her just a little bit, but I do think it would have been a little bit of a more flattering image. Or on the flip side, I would say go harder with the drama, right? If you wanted this to be a punchy flash look, I'd say go a little bit harder with the drama. So maybe darken down that background a little bit more and use a little bit more punch on the flash if you did want to create more of that like high fashion editorial, right, dramatic look. So I love the image as far as composition, posing, and all of that is concerned. Where I would, give a little bit of a tidbit is going one way or the other, right? I think right now the background and her, they're kind of fighting just a little bit because we did leave a little bit too much exposure in that background. So I would say either go all in on the, on the high fashion editorial flash look. And it looks like the flash might be a little bit diffused. Give me some of that hard light. Give me some of that hard light. When you're doing something like this, give me some of that hard light and really, kind of make that subject pop. Because as of right now, I'm not sure. No, she's definitely not more exposed in the clouds in the upper part of the image. So they're kind of fighting a little bit. So if you're going to do that, like, let's just go all in. Or like I said, I'm not opposed to shooting something natural light. I do think you could shoot this natural light and maybe just pop in a little bit of flash, right, to raise her levels if that's something that, you feel compelled to do. Moving on to the image that is black and white. So your black and white image. I absolutely love the way that you lit this. I can definitely see that she has an edge. I can see that edge on the back of her arm. And I can also see that the key light is coming from, this has to be like her right side, probably in like a more of a Rembrandt position. I get the only thing that I would say here is if you wanted to create a little bit more contrast, maybe feather that light off ever so slightly, or use maybe a modifier with a grid in it to kind of create just a little bit more blacks. But with her wearing a black dress and having on those black gloves, illuminating that background was a good choice because now it allows for, for them to pop off. And like I said, I am a huge proponent of using, said edge light. And I do believe that this was eloquently done. I would love to see the full body version of this if you did take a full body version of this. But I also, I have to say, I think wardrobe plays a huge part of capturing a black and white image. And when you have someone in black, it is behoove you to kind of make the background a little bit lighter, because when we're doing black and white images, we are playing around with contrast. And if that background gets too dark, then it is going to hide away some of the contrast in her black dress. So I really like the choices here. The hair stands out really, really well. Again, with that little bit of edge, you can see it in the back part of her hair. It brings that hair to life. And this, to me, probably out of all of the images, this is my favorite one, just based on how balanced everything is. And I can see that the intention was probably to make this a black and white image. And from wardrobe down to lighting, composition, and posing, I definitely think that this image hits. Moving on to your third image. This again, and so I think the outdoor vibes are the same, right? As far as this one compared to the other image. I can tell where the artificial light is coming from, but again, in my opinion, it's just clashing a little bit with what the image is already doing. So again, like that's why I said this one again could be shot natural light. I think if you're gonna use artificial light outdoors, for me, it just needs to have that little bit of a pop, right? Something like a hard light source where you're really making that subject stand out and then darkening down that background a little bit. Right now, I think the reason why this gives that it's a little bit more flat is because probably the time of day. It looks like it's a pretty sunny day. So the time of day, so the background and then her are pretty even as far as illumination is concerned. And that's where it kind of just starts to be like, okay, why did we bring in artificial light? So that's the question I would ask, is like, why would we use artificial light in this scenario? What were we trying to give with the artificial light? And if the point of bringing in that artificial light is to make her just pop like, wow, this is a hard hitting, high fashion look, because I love the styling, love the posing, hair, I love me a short haircut, I got the bleach blonde, that's perfect. So I would say darken that background down some more and really just, kind of spotlight her with a nice hard light source. And that would come off super, super great. All in all, your portfolio is super solid. Like I said, you have a great base, and everything I'm saying is just personal preference. You could have a completely different preference and tell me, get on my face. But this is just when I look at it, what I see, and some of the things that, I would maybe adjust, but very strong portfolio. And if this is where you're starting from, then you have a very great starting point. Love the fact that you go outside and shoot, something I need to do more, but it's a little hot here in Houston, but I love this portfolio. So Richard, thank you so much for sending in your images, and let's keep it going. Gabriel, welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for sending over your images for me to critique, and let's hop right into it. So first things first, I really love the way that you have clearly taken some of the setups that I've talked about and implemented them into your work immediately. The first photo that stands out to me is this beauty style image where you have the clamshell lighting. And this is the first image on this segment that someone used clamshell. So I'm going to start with this image. I absolutely love the way you composed your subject here. I would say if I could give like a little bit of a critique on the composition, push it in just a little bit more or bring it out just a little bit, because I am noticing that little bit of, cramped space right here on the model's outer arm on her left side. So either come back just a little bit, or you can push it in just a little bit so you can alleviate that and kind of get away from cutting off, some joints. But as far as the lighting is concerned, the lighting is set up very well. I'm going to zoom in here. Let me just take a quick peek. We do have a little bit of a hot spot on her forehead, so that could be mitigated by either backing that light source up a little bit. You could probably take it down some. I'm not sure if you metered it at all, but it is pretty hot on her face. And this is also something that could have been done in editing, right? So in editing, you could also kind of lower those whites a little bit so you can mitigate that exposure issue. But I do love the way that you have your light set up. I see both catch lights in the eyes, which is really, really good. And I feel like you have a decent bit of separation from the model in the background because it is falling to a gray. So this is very well, a setup that I personally would use in beauty work because I love the way that it creates a little bit of separation. If you wanted to one up this particular image, so let's say you had this exact same setup. You have the key in the fill, boom, clamshell, we got it going on. Two things you could do. First thing you could do is point two light, or actually you don't even have to do two. You can put one light directly behind your subject pointing at the background, right? So what is that going to do? It's going to do two things. The first thing that it's going to do is create a nice bright white background. But the second thing that it's going to do, because I can tell that the model's not like crazy far away from the background, the second thing that it's going to do is provide her a little bit of an edge light as well. So that's going to create, it's going to have like a double effect, right? Nice white background, but at the same time, you're going to give her a little bit of an edge. Another thing that you can do is if you put that light on the floor, so let's say you put it under like a strip box and you put it on the floor, and then you allow it to gradient up behind her. So what that would do is create a lighter portion of the background toward the bottom, and then toward the top, it would go into a darker gray to black, just depending on how you shoot it. Why this would be good for your picture specifically is because the highest part of the exposure in your image is around her face. So if we have that darkness coming up around her face, that's dope. And then you have the light parts down at the bottom part of the image where she's, inevitably a little bit more darker because we're doing a clamshell setup. So that's the second way that you could kind of elevate this image. The third way that you could elevate it, which is the way that I've been kind of playing around with recently, is if you have the ability to booming in an overhead light. I can't tell you how much of an effect overhead light has on an image, and just being able to edge the entire body and just have like that nice, that nice dramatic fall off. It just elevates a beauty image so much. it's still going to serve that purpose of bringing her off of that background. And it's not necessarily, just depending on how you do it, it's not necessarily going to affect the background too much either. So if you wanted to keep that gray, you're like, no, I want gray. This is what I need. Cool. You just boom in that overhead light. You know, I typically use like a smaller gridded softbox. That way I'm not just throwing light everywhere and it's very much, you know, focused on my subject. But that's a way that you could elevate this particular setup. But I have no complaints here, man. This is a great way to set up a nice, solid clamshell lighting. And like I said, keep playing around with the modifiers and the light placement, and you know, you can do some really nice things with this beauty. The next image that I want to pull up is, I believe, it's like a double face image. I'm not sure if this is a slow shutter or if you did like some sort of double exposure or if you did this in post, but a few things here that I really love about this image. Number one, I can tell that you have some sort of hair light. I'm not sure if that light is coming from overhead or if you just have it up really, really high in front of your subject, or like, you know, in the Rembrandt position, kind of pointing down. But I love the way that the light is hitting his hair. I love what you did with the background. I like that gradient from like that blue to kind of orangish yellow tone. That is absolutely something that I love to do, and it's great. I truly enjoy it. If I had to give a critique on this one, that hot spot on his forehead, it's just a little too harsh. So there's a couple different things we can do to mitigate that. One thing that you always want to think about whenever you're using some sort of like a hard light source is the skin that it's going to go on, right? Typically, when you're using that hard, super hard light source, you want to kind of make sure, right, either that the skin's not too oily, so that could just be like a little pad where you kind of just like blot the skin, just to make sure that it's, you know, not landing too hard. Or what you can do is kind of move the position, right? Move that position around a little bit so that way your hot spot is in like a little bit of a different position. But for this one, what you might want to consider is probably, I would soften that light just a little bit. So you can keep, let's say you use the reflector, you can keep the reflector or the snoot or whatever the case may be. I would just put like a little layer of diffusion in front of it. So like a 5-in-1 reflector, open that bad boy up and just put a little bit of diffusion, kind of like using a scrim. So that way we can kind of spread that light a little and it has a little bit of a better wrap and it doesn't have that crazy hard hot spot on his forehead. Other than that, I think this is a very solid image. I can definitely tell that you created some separation on the background. Like I said, again, I love how it comes up onto a gradient. Let me see if you did. Yep, and you added grain. I like adding grain to these types of images. The other thing that I would say, and I'm not sure if you did this, you can I would add a V flat to the opposite side of my subject, because I do see that the wrap is going around pretty harshly onto the other side of his garment. So he is wearing a lighter garment. So if you have like that bigger light source, it is going to wrap around. So I would bring in a V flat, right? Just kind of push it up. Honestly, I try to get it as close as I can to where it's not in the frame, kind of get it up nice and close to him. So that way you create a little bit more of an edge, right? As far as contrast on the opposite side of him from the side that is the key light. But all in all, great image. I love this. This is something that I would do. So, you know, I really rock with this. And like I said, keep pushing that creativity, because I really feel like that is where you can shine. Last image I want to do for you is going to be this black and white image. And this image in particular is the one that I feel we could do just a little bit of work on, right? Just be a little bit more intentional with our black and whites. Number one, the composition. It's a little jarring with us cutting off just like a piece of her arm and then, you know, cutting her off at the wrist there. Just a little bit jarring. I would say, you know, if you wanted to just kind of push it in just a little bit so that we're not just getting a little bit of her shoestring, right? And this could also be, you know, fixed in cropping as well. Once you kind of get the image in post, you don't have to necessarily take it perfectly. I just think, you know, cropping it a little bit differently would help. The second thing here as well is like we talked about, the difference between lights and darks in black and white images. So having a difference in light and darks in black and white images creates such a huge part of the contrast. And for this one specifically, kind of like what we talked about in that beauty image where you have the gradient background, this one specifically is where I can see that gradient background really working. If you look at her shorts, we're losing them, right? We're losing them in that black. And the fact that she has on a white top lends it, you know, well for us to be able to do a gradient backdrop, because if that black/dark gray falls behind that white shirt, it's going to look fine, right? It's actually going to pop out that white shirt even more. But then by having the bottom part of our background kind of lighten up just a little bit, it can kind of, you know, just show that she does have on black shorts and kind of bring that out ever so slightly. So I think for you, one thing that would be really good to do is kind of play around with your background gradients, right? Just don't blast a whole bunch of light and just kind of allow it to illuminate everything. Start to kind of play around with like V flats, you know, kind of grids and feathering your light to kind of play around with what it's doing to that backdrop. I think the overall consensus here with a lot of the critiques and even other images that I see is just kind of throwing a lot of light. And then once you take the picture, you're like, oh, it's exposed, we're good. Try to take it a step further, right? Try to condense that a little bit more. And I'm not saying you necessarily need to bring in a ton more lights or anything like that, but what we really want to try to do is control our lights. It's not enough to just pump a whole bunch of light, because you could do that in a natural light studio. You just have a whole bunch of light coming through, and then sure, you can take a very flat image and it can be, you know, look really nice. We have really good cameras. Every single camera does really well right now, but what we're trying to focus on here is kind of controlling that light. So I love that you are a constant user of the edge light and the hair light. Keep that. But now let's try to control that light source, you know, so we can kind of create some gradients in our background, give it a little bit more emotion, a little bit more drama. And like I said in a previous person's review, when you're shooting black and white images, wardrobe plays a huge part. And when you have a white top and a black bottom, that is a contrast already, right? That's already a contrast. So what we want to try to do with our background is we can kind of like flip that a little bit, create a little bit of contrast back there, and then they kind of play together, right? By having that darkness come down to a lighter bottom, they kind of play off of what you already have going on with your model. And then again, you create an image that's just that much more dynamic. I thank you so much, Gabriel, for sending in your images. These are dope. I love all the images that everyone sent in. So thank you all so much for sending these images in. And again, every single Thursday, this is what we're going to do. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for the first segment of portfolio reviews. And I will be doing this every single Thursday. I'm going to review as many portfolios as possible without making the video 2 hours long. This is a very sit and chat type of deal, right? This is like an inside look as to how it would be if I were your coach and kind of, you know, talking you through different things in your portfolio. And I want to get this point across as well. Number one, this is just how I approach photography. Everyone can approach photography their own way. Number two, it's often very small things that we have to do in our portfolios or in our images to make a huge difference. It's not typically, oh, you need to go buy $2,000 more worth of gear. You need to go and just completely change your entire workflow. It's typically not that. It's typically a small adjustment that we make that really has a huge impact on the imagery that we take. And that's the big thing that I want everyone to take away from this. No one is approaching photography incorrectly. You all are doing an amazing job. And thank you for being the first ones to just hop out there and be like, yo, put me out there, coach. Go ahead and review my portfolio. I'm trying to see what's good. And thank you for valuing my opinion that much. If you really want to get started on your journey to, you know, getting better at studio photography, studio lighting, the studio lighting bundle is going to be linked in the bio as well. If you want to submit your images to be reviewed, that link is going to be in my bio as well. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next video.